والله يدعو إلى دار السلام ويهدي من يشاء إلى صراط مستقيم.
Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalam ala Rasulullah. In alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen, hu alladhi ja'alna muslimin. This is Yusuf Estes, and for the next little bit we're going to be talking on the subject of our new series, Lifting the Fog, dealing with the misconceptions, misunderstandings, and falsehoods attributed to Islam. We want to begin by mentioning that the way the Muslims should respond to these accusations, insinuations, is always from the perspective of what the Quran and the teachings of Muhammad have shown us. The methodology or the manhaj of Islam dictates for us that we must, as Muslims, always present ourselves and the answers in the best possible light and remove these misconceptions. As a matter of fact, being a person who came to Islam myself, I have to understand that there is a mentality out there that people are afraid of what they don't understand. After all, I've been there myself. In fact, I remember thinking in the old days before coming to Islam, what about these people? What are they? Who are they? Where are they coming from? What's this religion about? So when we see these interrogations coming toward us, interrogatories that are really harsh, that are difficult and insulting, it's important for us to always recall that the Prophet, peace be upon him, experienced this and more, much more than this. So for us, it's not that complicated. It's very simple. We go back to the way that Muhammad, peace and blessing be upon him, dealt with these same things. But for us in the English language, we can do it real simple with these simple tactics. A person comes to you, and I'm going to give you an example. They say, "Oh, are you one of those Muslims? Well, we heard you Muslims have 4 wives. We want to know how come that a man can have 4 wives. Why can't the woman have 4 husbands?" Now, that's a pretty good question. And if you think about it, how would we answer that? If you start to try to explain the Quran says this, and Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said that, and this time is different than those times back in those days, and here we are in this millennium, etc., etc., you're going to, first of all, you're going to make a mistake because you're not going to give the right answer. Second of all, it doesn't sound like you know what you're talking about. You're going to confuse the people and make the situation even worse. You'll be frustrated, and they'll be confused, and that's obviously not what we're after. So what do I say? How do I handle it? Regardless of what the question might be, our response needs to come the same way every time and be consistent. Person comes to you in a harsh, attacking manner, your response should always be, "Thank you for asking me about my religion." They're going to go, "Huh?" They're not ready for that, especially when they came to you with such a harsh statement contained in their question. That's why we usually tell them that the best thing for us to do is to begin by remembering that they really don't know. And they're confused. They've heard people say things. So they have the right to know the truth about what is Islam and what Islam is saying about these particular situations or questions that they're bringing up. So we begin by telling them that Islam is based on truth. We have to tell the truth or we can go to hell. So that's very serious for us. The second thing is that Islam is having the proof. Everything is documented and preserved and authenticated for over 1,400 years. So this is not something that's going to be a difficult problem for us to solve. The third thing I like to tell them is that a lot of times questions are not really questions as much as they are statements. But they have a question mark at the end of it. And sometimes you can't really give a simple answer to a question that has a statement in it if the statement is incorrect. Let's give an example of a question that has a statement in it that's incorrect. Someone comes to you and says, "Can you answer for me a question with a yes or no answer?" You go, "Okay." Then they say, "Is your mother out of jail yet?" What kind of question is this? My mother's never been in jail. No, you said you could answer yes or no. We just want yes or no. But she's never been, yes or no. How can I answer such a question as this? Because if I say, well, she's not in jail, therefore she's out of jail, so I'll say, yes, she's out, then they're going to say what? They're going to say, oh, I'm glad she got out. but she's never been in jail. And if I say, well, no, meaning that no, she's never been in jail, then where would I be with that? Because the situation now, I'd be saying that, in fact, she's still in jail. And neither one of these are correct answers, but I can't give a correct answer because the question has a statement which is false. And so how can I deal with that? First thing is to take the question and straighten it out and say, do you mean by your question, has my other mother ever been in jail? The answer, of course, would be no. And that would be the best way to deal with that question. So as we begin to give them the answer to the question by straightening it out, the next thing we want to say to them is, by the way, have you considered that if you hear something in this statement, that when we begin to give you the answers, you hear something you like, and you said, gee, this is nice. This is something I like it for me. And if you heard that in the answer to your question, would you be prepared at that stage to reconsider your life and see what you're doing and then consider worshiping your Lord and your God alone without any partners? Because you see, this is what Islam is really all about. Now, at that stage, they're going to go, what? Because the answer to your question actually shows you why there really is a God. And it shows you why there can only be one God. And it shows you why you have to worship Him without partners. But based on what I just said, would you like to hear the answer? What do you think they're going to say? Of course, they want to know the answer now. Now we'll come back to that particular question. Why can a man have 4 wives and a woman cannot have 4 husbands? Well, first of all, the way they ask the questions, there are different forms of the same question. They say, why does Islam say you have to have 4 wives? And of course, on that one, it doesn't say you have to have 4 wives. And when it comes to the number of wives and the number of husbands, this is something that you have to understand and explain a little bit. So it means you're going to have a couple of minutes to sit here and talk about it. First and foremost, though, is to understand that Islam is about what? It's about marriage. Because in marriage, you have a contract. And in a contract, people have rights. So now we get to come to the biggest subject of all. Islam is about rights. But it has a balance. And the balance is the limits. You have a right. You have a right to have a mate, someone to be with intimately, someone to love and care for you, someone to be compassionate with, and someone to share your life with. That's your right. But there's limits. And this is why Islam is coming from Allah, not from us. It's not a man-made religion. It's not something that I made up or that you can make up or even that the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, made up. It is from Allah. Let's understand something. When we begin to talk about the marriage and the idea in Islam of having more than one spouse, that word actually is not polygamy. Polygamy is a word in English which means to have more than one spouse without limit. Okay? It can be a number of husbands or wives. Okay? The word we're looking for in English is polygyny, which means that a man is able to have more than one spouse, but not the woman. Now, if you said, well, that's limiting, and why is that, and how come it's not fair? Again, I remember to mention to you, remind you, that Islam is talking about what's right and righteous, not about what human beings consider to be fair. And when the verse comes that talks about this